hot flashes, mood swings, restless sleep, weight gain that seems to come out of nowhere. What if some of the most important foods women used for these challenges were sitting in the Bible all along? Dates, almonds, barley. In this video, you'll discover how biblical women used these foods, what researchers are learning about them today, and the forgotten system behind them that may matter even more than the foods themselves. When we talk about hormonal balance today, we often focus on symptoms: low energy, poor sleep, mood changes, weight gain, hot flashes. Ancient cultures tended to look at these challenges differently. They viewed health as a connected system. A woman's energy, nourishment, sleep, emotional well-being, movement, and daily rhythms were not separate issues. They were connected. This perspective shaped the foods and practices women relied upon. Instead of searching for quick solutions, ancient communities focused on foundations: daily nourishment, seasonal eating, consistent routines, strong family and social bonds. They understood something many modern people struggle to remember. The body responds to patterns, not just moments. This wasn't lost knowledge, it was interrupted knowledge. The foods remained. The wisdom surrounding them slowly faded. As modern life became faster and more fragmented, many traditions that once supported women's health quietly disappeared from daily life. They didn't remove the remedy, they removed the system. Now, none of this means ancient people understood hormones the way we do today. They didn't. Modern medicine has provided incredible insight into women's health and offers valuable support for women experiencing hormonal challenges. But ancient women were careful observers. They noticed what helped them feel stronger, what supported energy, what helped them recover, what allowed them to remain resilient through changing seasons of life. And those observations became traditions. Today, modern science is beginning to understand some of the same patterns they observed centuries ago. The first one starts with a food that was treasured throughout the biblical world. Throughout the biblical world, dates were among the most valued foods available. They were naturally sweet, easy to store, rich in nourishment, and deeply woven into everyday life. For women managing households, raising children, and carrying the responsibilities of daily life, reliable nourishment mattered. Ancient people may not have understood metabolism, hormones, or nutritional science, but they understood something through experience. When nourishment suffered, everything else suffered. Energy, mood, patience, resilience, recovery. Everything became harder. Today, modern science continues exploring how nutrient-dense whole foods contribute to overall well-being. Researchers increasingly recognize that the body's systems are interconnected. The brain doesn't operate separately from the body. Neither do hormones. Everything influences everything else. The deeper lesson of dates isn't that they were a miracle food. They weren't. The lesson is that ancient women prioritized nourishment before intervention. They started with daily support, not occasional solutions. That's the difference between a remedy and a foundation. Many modern approaches begin by asking what should be added. Ancient approaches often began by asking what foundations were missing. They didn't use dates occasionally. They built life around them. And that's a lesson worth remembering. They weren't chasing symptoms. They were strengthening systems. But nourishment was only the beginning. Ancient women also relied on foods that symbolized renewal itself. Foods that reminded them that strength wasn't built in a single day. It was built over time. And one of the most fascinating examples appears in one of the Bible's most remarkable stories. One of the most overlooked foods in Scripture is the almond. Throughout the Bible, almonds are associated with life, renewal, and watchfulness. One of the most famous examples comes from Aaron's rod, which budded and produced almond blossoms. That detail carried enormous significance. The almond tree was among the earliest trees to bloom after winter. Long before other trees showed signs of life, the almond tree awakened. It became a symbol of renewal, a symbol of vitality returning. Ancient communities valued almonds not simply because they tasted good. They were nourishing, portable, easy to store, and available during times when other foods were scarce. For women navigating the physical demands of life, foods that provided lasting nourishment mattered. Today, modern science is increasingly interested in foods rich in healthy fats, minerals, and plant compounds. Researchers continue studying how nutrient-dense foods such as almonds contribute to overall wellness, healthy aging, and metabolic health. Ancient women didn't understand the science, but they understood the outcomes. They noticed which foods sustained them, which foods supported energy, which foods seemed to help them remain strong through demanding seasons of life. That's what makes almonds so interesting. They weren't viewed as a special intervention. They were part of a foundation, part of daily life, part of a larger system. They didn't use them occasionally. They built life around them. The deeper lesson is simple. Renewal rarely comes from one dramatic action. It comes from consistent support repeated over time. That's the difference between intervention and foundation. They didn't remove the food. They removed the relationship. At this point, a pattern begins to emerge. Dates represented nourishment. Almonds represented renewal. But ancient women also relied on something even more fundamental. A food so common that most people would never think of it as a health practice at all. And that may be exactly why it's worth paying attention to. When people think about biblical foods, barley rarely comes to mind. Yet it appears throughout Scripture, again and again. For generations, barley served as one of the foundational foods of daily life. It wasn't rare. It wasn't exotic. It was dependable. And that's exactly why it mattered. Ancient people understood something modern culture often forgets. The foods we eat consistently shape us more than the foods we eat occasionally. Barley was woven into everyday life. Daily meals, daily routines, daily nourishment. For women, this mattered because resilience wasn't built through occasional interventions. It was built through consistent support. Today, researchers continue exploring how whole grains contribute to digestive health, metabolic health, and long-term well-being. Modern science is increasingly recognizing connections between digestion, energy regulation, inflammation, and overall health. Ancient observers didn't use those words, but they noticed the same patterns. When foundational nourishment improved, people often functioned better. The deeper lesson of barley isn't about one grain. It's about consistency. Barley reminds us that ancient wellness systems weren't built around shortcuts. They were built around habits, the kind of habits repeated for years, the kind that quietly strengthen the body over time. They didn't use this occasionally. They built life around it. That's the difference between using something and depending on it. Modern culture often searches for dramatic solutions. Ancient cultures often trusted steady practices, simple foods, repeated habits, daily rhythms. They weren't chasing symptoms. They were managing systems. And that's why barley remained part of life, for generation after generation. Not because it was exciting, because it was dependable. And sometimes the most powerful forms of support are the ones that become ordinary. When we look back at these three biblical foods, a clear pattern emerges. Dates represented nourishment. Almonds represented renewal. Barley represented resilience. At first glance, they seem unrelated. But underneath, they share the same philosophy: daily support, long-term thinking, system-based health. Ancient women weren't searching for quick fixes. They were building foundations. That's what made these traditions powerful, not because of one ingredient, but because of the patterns surrounding them. They didn't rely on occasional interventions. They relied on consistent practices. They weren't chasing symptoms. They were managing systems. And that perspective may be one of the most valuable lessons we can recover today. One of the most remarkable things about ancient wisdom is that it often survives long before science explains it. Generation after generation observed patterns. They noticed what supported strength, what supported vitality, what helped women remain resilient through changing seasons of life. They passed those lessons forward. Today, modern science continues exploring many of those same observations through a completely different lens. That doesn't mean biblical foods replace modern medicine. They don't. Women experiencing hormonal concerns should always work with qualified healthcare professionals when needed. But alongside modern tools, there may be wisdom worth rediscovering. Not because it's ancient, because it's practical. The goal isn't to return to the past. It's to recover what was valuable and bring it forward. Because sometimes the most important discoveries aren't new discoveries at all. They're remembered ones. If you enjoy exploring biblical health wisdom, ancient remedies, and the forgotten practices modern science is beginning to understand, subscribe to the channel. And in the next video, we'll uncover the biblical approach to healthy aging that women relied on for generations before modern supplements ever existed.